My name is Liam, and I want to tell you something that most people my age are too embarrassed to say out loud. I was manipulated by my own family, slowly, quietly, over the course of 4 years, and I didn't see it happening until the morning my daughter-in-law sat across from me at my own kitchen table, poured me a cup of coffee like she always did, smiled, and then told me that I owed her $1,000 a month in rent. Not a suggestion, not a conversation, a number, a deadline, and a threat wrapped in a smile that said, "If you don't agree, we need to revisit this living arrangement." Now here's what I need you to understand before I tell you the rest of this story. I was not a man who had nothing. I had $240,000 sitting in a savings account. Money from the sale of my home of 26 years. The home where I raised my son. The home where my wife Carol cooked Sunday dinners and kept a garden in the backyard and knew every creak in every floorboard. I had a pension. I had Social Security. I had options. And I gave all of them up, one small piece at a time, because I told myself I was being a good father, a good grandfather, a generous man. What I was actually being was convenient. This is the story of how I lost my home, my money, my independence, and very nearly my dignity. Not to a stranger, not to a scam, not to anything dramatic enough to warn anyone about. It happened in the most ordinary way possible, which is exactly why I'm telling you. Because if you have a parent in your life right now who is living with family, or if you are the parent, or if you recognize even one thing I'm about to describe, then this story is for you. Stay with me, because by the end of it, you're going to understand something about generosity and manipulation and boundaries that took me 4 years to learn and cost me more than money. My wife Carol died in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone. We had been married for 41 years. 41 years. I want you to sit with that number for a second. When you have built 41 years of a life with someone, their absence does not feel like loss. It feels like the walls of a house disappearing. Everything is still technically standing, but there is nothing holding it up. I sat in our kitchen on Clover Street in Dayton, Ohio for 3 days after the funeral eating crackers, watching the clock and not understanding how time was still moving when the most important thing in my world had stopped. The house had 3 bedrooms. It was modest. We bought it in 1994 when our son was 7 years old. And in the weeks after Carol died, that house became the loneliest place I had ever been in my life. Not because it was empty, because it was full. Full of her. Her books on the shelves. Her handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower from a trip we took to New Mexico. Her shampoo still in the shower. And at 66 years old, I was alone inside all of it, trying to figure out how to exist in a life that no longer had its center. My son called every night that first month. He lives in Columbus, an hour and a half east. He'd married his wife. Her name is not something I need to give you, so I'll call her by what she was. The architect of everything I'm about to tell you. He'd married her 4 years before Carol died. They moved fast. 8 months of dating, engaged, married within 2 years. Carol had reservations she kept mostly to herself. I told her every couple finds their own pace. I believe that. I still believe it, actually. But I understand now that speed is not always about love. Sometimes it is about something else entirely. Those evening calls with my son, they were good for a while. We talked about nothing important. Sports. The weather. What I'd made for dinner. He'd ask how I was sleeping. I'd say fine, even when I wasn't. That was my contribution to the situation. I was protecting him from worrying about me. I thought that's what good fathers did. But sometime around October, 5 months after Carol died, the calls started to change. It wasn't anything I could point to immediately. That's what I want you to understand. It was never one sentence. It was never one moment. It was a pattern. A very deliberate, very patient pattern. My son would say things like, "Dad, that's a lot of house for one person." Or he'd mention that property values on Clover Street had really gone up. Or he'd tell me a story about some guy at work who sold his place, moved near his kids, said it was the best decision he ever made. He was not asking me anything. He was just planting things. And I, a man who was grieving and sleeping badly and eating soup from a can at midnight, was fertile ground. Then his wife started joining the calls. And here is where I need to be very precise, because this part matters. She was warm, warmer than I expected. She asked about my health. She said they worried about me rattling around in that big house alone. She mentioned, casually, warmly, like it had just occurred to her, that their house in Columbus had a finished basement. Basically its own apartment. Private entrance. Full bathroom. A little kitchenette. They'd been using it for storage, she said, but it wouldn't take much to clear it out. I said that was very kind. I said I wasn't ready to make any decisions. She said, of course. No pressure at all. We just want you to know the offer is there. I believed her. That's the part one keep returning to. I genuinely believed her. I thought these were two people who loved me and were worried about me. I thought the offer came from the same place Carol's Sunday dinners came from. I thought generosity recognized itself. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. And it took me 4 years to fully understand it, which is why I want you to pay attention to every single step that came next. Because this is how it works. This is exactly how it works. When the pandemic shut everything down in March of 2020, I was alone in that house for weeks at a stretch. My neighbor Roy waved from across the street sometimes. My sister Patricia was in Arizona. I'm not dramatic about what those months were. I won't pretend they were easy. I was 67 years old. I was sleeping in a bed that still faintly smelled of Carol's shampoo. I was watching the news until 2 in the morning. I was, if I'm honest, starting to disappear from myself in a way that scared me a little when I thought about it too directly. So when my son called in April and said, "Dad, just come stay with us for a while. We'll set up the basement. Please." I sat with it for 3 weeks. I made a list, which Carol always said was how I avoided making decisions. I looked at the list for a long time, and then I packed a bag and drove to Columbus. I want to be honest about what came next, because not all of it was manipulation. Some of it was genuinely the best time I'd had since Carol died. And that matters, because it's what made everything that followed so much harder to see clearly. That first summer in Columbus was good. My son grilled on Saturdays. His wife made a rosemary chicken that I still think about. They had 2 kids, a boy who was 9 and a girl who was 6. And those 2 grandchildren became the best thing in my daily life, without me even deciding they would be. The boy loved baseball. The girl loved dinosaurs with a level of passion that I found both impressive and slightly alarming. We built things out of cardboard boxes on rainy days. I took them to the park. I helped with homework. I watched my grandson explain batting averages to me like I was a very promising student, and I let him. The basement apartment was exactly what they described. Private. Quiet. I kept my own hours. My son and I watched football on Sunday afternoons for the first time since Carol died. I felt, for the first time in a year, like I wasn't disappearing. Then in August, my son mentioned I should think about selling the Clover Street house. He wasn't wrong about the facts. The market was unusual. Prices were up. Holding an empty house was expensive when you factored in taxes, insurance, upkeep. He said I clearly wasn't going back to Dayton to live. I sat with it. In October, I listed the house. It sold in 11 days for considerably more than we'd paid for it. After the mortgage payoff, the realtor fees, the repairs I'd made before listing, I cleared $240,000. I put it in my savings account. That was my money. Mine and Carol's. The whole life we'd built together, distilled into a number in an account. I want you to hold that number. $240,000. Because you're going to watch it become a target. And you're going to watch it happen slowly enough that I didn't notice until it was almost gone. Things shifted in February of the following year. My son and his wife sat down with me one evening after the kids were in bed. They had that particular energy that couples have when they've rehearsed something. They told me they were looking at a bigger house, better schools. The Columbus market being what it was, they were about $30,000 short of the down payment they needed to feel comfortable. They weren't asking, my son said. They just wanted to be transparent. Because I was family, and they didn't keep secrets. The way he looked at me when he said that, I thought about it for a week. I thought about the grandchildren and the school district and the backyard my son described. I thought about Carol and how much she would have wanted those kids to have stability and space in a good neighborhood. I thought about $240,000 sitting in an account I wasn't using for anything in particular. I gave them $30,000. I told them it was a gift, not a loan. I meant it. My son shook my hand. His wife hugged me and said I was the most generous man she'd ever known. She said it with her eyes bright and her voice warm, and I believed that too. They found a house in Westerville. Beautiful neighborhood. 4 bedrooms. A real backyard. A finished attic. The basement arrangement transferred to the new house. My space was actually nicer than before, a walkout unit with its own little patio where I could sit in the mornings with my coffee. I felt like I was contributing. And here is something important I want you to understand about that feeling, because it drove almost every decision I made over the next 2 years. I was not a man sitting with his hand out. I need you to know that. I bought groceries twice a week. Good groceries. The kind that stocked a full kitchen. I picked the grandchildren up from school 3 days a week. I helped with the yard. When the dishwasher broke in September, I didn't say a word to anyone. I just called a repairman and paid for it. When my grandson needed cleats for baseball and then again for fall soccer, I bought them without being asked. I was there. I was part of that house. I was earning my place, I thought. That's what I thought I was doing. My retirement income was about $3,100 a month between my pension and Social Security. I used it for my own expenses. Gas. A dinner out occasionally. New clothes when I needed them. Doctor visits. I was not a burden. I want to be clear about that, because it matters for everything that comes next. In November, my son mentioned casually that the mortgage on the new house was tighter than they'd expected. Interest rates. He didn't ask for anything. He just mentioned it. His wife mentioned the utilities the following week at dinner. Higher square footage. Gas bills in winter. She was matter-of-fact about it. Conversational. I noticed she was looking at her plate when she said it. I started paying $300 a month toward utilities. I brought it up myself. I told them I wanted to help. My son said it wasn't necessary. I said I wanted to. He said thank you. His wife smiled, a particular smile she had that I can only describe now as professional. The $300 became $400 in February when I offered to cover the cable and internet bill too, since I used it as much as anyone. In March, she started handling my grocery runs through a shared account. She set it up herself. Explained it was more efficient. She could order everything together. Saved trips. Made sense on paper. I transferred $500 a month into the shared account for groceries. By April, I was contributing close to $900 a month to that household. Not counting the school pickups. Not counting the yard work. Not counting the appliance repairs, the kids' sports fees, their birthday presents, the Christmas gifts, the backyard swing set I bought in August because the kids wanted one and I wanted to give it to them. I thought we had an understanding. I thought I was earning my place in a real and meaningful way. I thought the arrangement was working for everyone. I thought, and this is the part that is hardest to admit, I thought that love was enough of a foundation to build an arrangement like this on. That if I kept showing up, kept giving, kept being present and useful and generous, the unspoken debt I seemed to owe for existing in their house would eventually be paid. I was wrong. There is no floor on that debt. That is the thing I had to learn. My son called me on the phone one afternoon in May. I was 40 feet away in the basement. He called me on the phone. The phrasing of the voicemail stayed with me all day. Hey Dad, do you have time to talk tonight? Not come upstairs. Not a knock on the door. A scheduled call. From my own son. 40 feet away. We sat at the kitchen table after dinner. His wife sat across from me. He sat at the end between us. The kids were upstairs. She did most of the talking. She said the household expenses had grown considerably. That with the mortgage and car payments and the kids' activities, they were feeling stretched. She said she'd done some math. She said the basement unit, if they rented it to a tenant on the open market, would easily bring in $1,500 a month in Columbus. Probably closer to $1,700 or $1,800. She said she wasn't saying that's what they wanted to do. She said she was just being transparent. The word she kept using was fair. It would be fair, she said, if I contributed $1,000 a month toward my space, in addition to the groceries and utilities I was already paying. I sat there. I looked at my son. I asked what he thought. He said she made some valid points. He was looking at the table. I said I'd think about it. I went downstairs and sat on my little patio in the dark, and I stayed there for a long time. I thought about $30,000. I thought about 2 years of groceries and appliance repairs and school pickups and Christmas and a swing set and cleats and the dishwasher and the cable bill and $900 a month and 100 small things I'd done and never mentioned and never expected credit for. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would say. She would have said it in 2 sentences, probably. They would have been the right 2 sentences. I'm not as economical as she was. I started keeping track after that night. Not because I planned to do anything with the numbers, just because I needed to see them. And when I did, what I saw was this. In the 14 months since we'd moved to the Westerville house, I had contributed, in cash and in services, somewhere between $22,000 and $25,000 to their household. on top of the $30,000 gift. I had provided 3 days a week of childcare every single week, which at any reasonable market rate would have cost them another $8,000 to $10,000. I had paid for repairs, clothing, supplies, activities, presents, holidays, and a backyard swing set. And now she was sitting across from me at my own kitchen table telling me that on top of all of that, $1,000 a month in rent was the fair thing. The word fair. I kept returning to it. She'd used it deliberately. Because if you call something fair, the person who refuses it becomes the unreasonable one. That's the architecture of it. That's how it's built. I called my sister Patricia. She lives in Arizona. She was Carol's closest friend and my sister, which is a combination that produces very direct advice whether you are ready for it or not. I'd learned a long time ago that when I called Patricia, I should mean it. So I called her and I meant it. She listened for about 20 minutes without saying anything. Then she said, "You know what they're doing, right?" I said, "I thought I did." She said, "Don't ask permission for things that are already yours." I sat with that for a week. In that week, his wife texted me twice. Friendly, normal. Nothing about the conversation. My son brought me coffee one morning and asked how I was sleeping. Fine, I said. It was almost like it hadn't happened. That near erasure of what she'd said, the way they both just resumed normal life around me while I was sitting downstairs trying to figure out if what had happened was as significant as it felt, that was its own kind of pressure. Designed, I think, to make me doubt myself. To make me feel like maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I'd misheard something. Maybe the fair thing really was $1,000 a month. Then she asked again. Just the two of us at breakfast. My son was already at work. She poured my coffee. She sat down across from me. She said she wanted to revisit the discussion because she felt it had landed wrong, and she wanted to be clear that they appreciated everything I did. Then she asked when I thought I might be able to start contributing the additional amount. I put my cup down. I said, "I've given you $30,000. I give you $400 a month in utilities and internet. I give you $500 a month in groceries. I have spent over $20,000 on this household in 14 months. I pick up your children from school 3 days a week, every week, without fail. I do not owe you rent." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she understood I'd done a lot and they were grateful, but that circumstances had changed and they needed to look at things practically. I said I was also being practical. She said they might need to revisit the living arrangement if we couldn't come to an agreement. She said it the way people say things they've been planning to say for a long time. I called Patricia again that afternoon. She said, "Where do you want to be in 6 months? Figure that out and work backwards." It was the right question. And for the first time in a very long time, I sat down and actually answered it. I told my son I wanted to have a conversation. Just us. He looked like he'd been expecting it. We drove to a diner about 2 miles from the house. Neutral ground, which felt a little sad. We sat in a booth and ordered coffee, and I looked at my son who I had watched learn to ride a bike on Clover Street, who I'd driven to every baseball game for 6 years, who I had helped move 3 times before he settled in Columbus. And I told him I loved him. I said that first. I want you to know that. Then I told him that what had been asked of me was not fair. I laid out the numbers. All of them. My son is not a stupid man. He knew the numbers. I could tell by the way he looked, that specific uncomfortable expression people have when they've known something and been choosing not to address it for a while. He said his wife handled most of the finances. I said I understood that. I said it also wasn't relevant. He said she was under a lot of pressure. I said I was 68 years old. I had been a widower for 3 years. I had sold my home. I had given him $30,000. I had been picking up his children from school 3 days a week for over a year. And if anyone at the table had been under sustained pressure without complaint, we both knew who that was. He didn't say anything for a long time. He stirred his coffee. He looked like he was doing something hard inside himself. Then he said, "I know, Dad." Quiet. 2 words. I believe he meant them. I still believe that. I told him I'd been thinking about my options. I told him I'd spoken to a real estate agent without telling anyone. I'd looked at 2-bedroom condos in the area. With what remained from the Clover Street sale, even after everything, after the $30,000 gift, after all of it, I had enough to buy something outright. No mortgage. Mine. I told him I thought that was probably the right move. He looked like he was going to argue. Then he looked like he wasn't. He asked if I was angry. I thought about it. I said I wasn't angry the way people mean when they ask that. I was clear. There's a difference. Anger is what you feel when you're surprised. I hadn't been surprised in quite a while. I'd just been slow to act on what I already knew. When I told them both together that I'd be moving into my own place in 8 weeks, she said she was sorry to hear that and hoped it wasn't because of any misunderstanding. I said it wasn't a misunderstanding at all. I let the silence sit there. I did not fill it. That was new for me. Those 8 weeks were strange. Polite and strange. She was cordial. My son was quieter than usual. The grandchildren didn't know anything was changing until about 2 weeks before I left. I sat them down and explained that Grandpa was getting his own house nearby. I sold it as exciting news because it was a nice condo, a complex with a pool. My grandson immediately asked if he could swim there. I said absolutely, anytime he wanted. My granddaughter asked if there would be room for her marine biology books. I told her the second bedroom was practically designed for them. I found a 2-bedroom condo in Dublin, 12 minutes from their house. Second floor, south-facing windows. Good light in the mornings. I paid for it outright. Put the remaining money back in my account where it belonged. I moved in on a Thursday in late September. The first morning in my own place. I want to tell you what that felt like, because I think it's the point where everything in this story becomes something other than a cautionary tale. I woke up. I made my own coffee. I sat at my own table. I read the paper for an hour without anyone needing anything from me. It felt like something I had forgotten I was allowed to have. Not happiness exactly. Quieter than that. Like the first breath after you've been holding one for a very long time without realizing it. The grandchildren came to swim the following Saturday. My son brought them. He stayed for a while, and we sat by the pool in the October sun and watched them cannonball into the water, and it was easy between us in a way it hadn't been in months. He said, "This is a good place, Dad." I said I thought so too. He said he was sorry things had gotten complicated. I said things get complicated sometimes. I left it at that. But that wasn't the end of it. Over the weeks and months that followed, my son and I had harder conversations. The honest kind. The kind that are only possible when neither person needs anything from the other. The kind that Carol would have made happen years earlier. He admitted, not once, but in pieces, over several conversations, that things had moved in a direction he should have noticed sooner. That he had known, somewhere, that the situation wasn't right, and had made the choice repeatedly to say nothing. I believe him when he says that. My son is a good man. A genuinely good man. But he had let someone else make decisions that should have included him, and in doing so, he had allowed something wrong to happen to his father. That's a specific kind of failure that I don't think is easy to come back from, but I've watched him try. And that matters. That counts for something real. His wife is civil now. Polite. We will probably never be close. I've made peace with that. I understand now what she was doing and what she needed. She needed security, financial stability, the kind of cushion that made her feel safe. And I was the softest available target for that need. She didn't hate me. She just needed something from me more than she needed to respect me. And she operated accordingly until I stopped letting her. There's nothing dramatic left to say about that. She got what she got. I reclaimed what I reclaimed. We have both recalibrated. I see the grandchildren twice a week minimum. Sometimes 3 times. I still pick them up on Wednesdays. I offered, because I wanted to, not because I owed it. We stop for ice cream on the way home every single time. My grandson is deep into baseball statistics now, which means we have approximately 2 hours of material every Wednesday afternoon. My granddaughter has moved from dinosaurs into marine biology and describes it with identical intensity, and I am here for every single word of it. I have a patio where I drink my coffee in the morning. I have a second bedroom that is becoming a reading room. I have money in an account with my name on it. I do not check my phone until I'm ready. I am 68 years old, and I am, for the first time in 4 years, not giving anything away that I didn't consciously choose to give. And now I want to tell you the thing that I think matters most. The thing I'm telling this story for. I gave from love. That part was right. Every dollar, every school pickup, every repairman I called, every swing set I bought. That all came from love, and I don't regret a single piece of it. What was wrong was the belief underneath it. The belief that love required me to hollow myself out indefinitely. That there was no floor below which I would not be expected to give more. I confused being generous with being available for whatever anyone needed from me. I confused keeping the peace with actually having peace. Those are not the same things. They feel similar for a long time. And then one morning you're sitting across from someone at your own kitchen table, and they're telling you that everything you've already given is insufficient, and you need to pay rent, and the ground opens up under you, and you realize you've been standing on something much thinner than you thought for much longer than you knew. There are people in your life right now, maybe you're one of them, who are in the early stages of what I just described. Maybe it's your parent who moved in with family after a loss. Maybe it's you, the parent, telling yourself that things will balance out eventually, that your contribution is being seen, that the small uncomfortable moments don't add up to something worth confronting. Maybe it's someone else entirely. But I want you to hear this clearly, because I needed to hear it years before I did. Generosity is a choice. It should always be a choice. The moment it stops being a choice and starts being an expectation, the moment someone tells you that your continued presence in a place depends on giving more than you've already given, that is not generosity anymore. That is extraction, and you are allowed to name it. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away without guilt, without drama, without feeling like you have failed anyone. I did not fail my son. I love my son. I failed myself. And the failure was specific. I waited too long to treat my own life as something worth protecting. I waited for someone to stop taking before I started holding. I kept lowering the floor, thinking there would come a point where I'd given enough that the need would end. There is no such point. If you are waiting for that point, you will wait forever. Carol died in the spring of 2019, and in the grief that followed, I made myself smaller and smaller, thinking that was what love asked for, thinking that need was the same as belonging, thinking that if I just gave enough, I'd earn a permanence in the life I'd stumbled into. What I actually needed was my own life, my own door, my own table, my own morning. I have that now. 12 minutes from my grandchildren, south-facing windows, a patio, coffee that I make exactly the way I want it. Carol would have said I took too long to get here. She would have been right. She was usually right about the things that mattered. But I got here, and the morning I moved in, the morning I sat at my own table in my own kitchen and no one needed anything from me, and the sun came through the window the way I wanted it to, I sat there for a long time. And I thought, this is what I should have protected 4 years ago. Not the money, not the house. This, the quiet, the morning, the right to simply be. If you're watching this and something in this story felt familiar, if you recognized a pattern, a conversation, a moment, then I want you to do one thing. Not a big thing, just one. Write down what you actually own. Not materially. I mean what belongs to you that you've been letting other people determine the value of. Your time, your space, your savings, your mornings. Write them down and look at them. Then ask yourself whether the people around you are treating those things the way they should be treated. If the answer is no, you don't have to do anything dramatic. You don't have to have a speech. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to stop lowering the floor. My name is Liam. I'm 68 years old. I live 12 minutes from my grandchildren. I have my own door. I have my own morning. And I do not owe anyone a single thing I haven't chosen to give.